Want to start recording first? Thanks. Yeah. Welcome, everyone. Very excited to have Liz Canning, the director, animator, editor, amazing creator, producer of the Motherload film that we've all been lucky enough to experience in the last 48 hours, or maybe sooner or later, before that. My name is Anna Pickett. I work at the Yale School of the Environment with the Hickson Center for Urban Ecology and also the Urban Resources Initiative. And I am thankful to the Yale School of the Environment's urban learning community for welcoming me inviting me to host this event and to co-sponsor the event with them. We have with us a couple of special guests, in addition to Liz Canning, Dave Cohen, who was featured in the film, Sarah Armstrong, and I don't know if Sarah Bolitzer is also in here yet, but we're expecting a couple of the people that are featured in the film to be with us as well to answer your questions. And we also have a couple of local cycling advocates and professionals in the room to talk about specifically about New Haven and cycling here, because this is the Yale's home, and we're excited to kind of think about how this film might impact us and the world at large as well. So we're going to start off by asking everyone to kind of share with us, so we have a little bit of knowledge about who's in the room, to put a poll everywhere poll to let us know where you're coming from. Jonathan, are you able to put that into the chat? So if you see this link, I don't know if you have done this before, but if you click on the link and then you can take up your mouse and pinpoint where you are, and I will share the results on the screen. Can you all see our map here? We've got a lot of people in the US and some in Canada, Europe, the UK, got Australia, and maybe.
That's Anna.
Hi.
Greenland.
Whoa.
So I also wanted to ask everyone this is awesome that you're all with us this evening. I don't know, it must be some kind of wild timing for some of you that are not in our time zone, and we're grateful that you made the effort to be here. The next question that we wanted to ask everyone, I'll share another link. Answer. So the question is asking, were you a commuting cyclist before you watched this film? And I'm going to share my screen when I hit so many buttons. So we have a lot of active, what Liz calls courageous cyclists, that sometimes are confused for insane cyclists. It'll be interesting to know, we want to know now, after having watched the film, do you think that your behaviors will change? Yeah. So
We've put another poll in the chat if you've just arrived.
thanks, Jonathan. So, oh, this isn't the right one, sorry. Can I? Oh, well, that's a resounding answer. 91% plan to ride more. That's awesome. Liz, does that make you happy?
Oh, that's wonderful. Wow. Out of, what do you have, 82 people? Yeah, 83 people. That's really cool. Thank you for doing that.
Now we have a little bit of a sense of who's in the room. Liz, will you tell us a little bit? You worked on this film for 8 years, and it's quite an accomplishment, quite a feat. And can you tell us a little bit about what inspired you, and what was that moment like when you decided, yes, I'm going to make this film?
Sure. So I had been, from when my kids were born, I was an editor of documentaries and corporate stuff, but I was so exhausted with little twins that I really only had the brain power to do the corporate stuff. And I needed money. So I did that, and I became really depressed and creatively frustrated. And I started talking to the camera about this feeling that I had of being disconnected and depressed. I didn't know what I was going to do with it for a long time. And I was pulling the kids around in a trailer, but one day I could not pull the trailer up the hill anymore. So I did, as you see in the film, I Googled like carry kids on bike, and discovered these people, a couple of whom I think are here tonight, who were so enthusiastic. There was so much energy. I mean, it was really palpable online. And when we got the electric motor on my car, well, first I got a cargo bike. And then when we got the electric motor on my bike, I thought, this isn't just for weirdos like me. You know, anybody could do this. This could really go mainstream. And so my husband had watched me like cycle through ideas for films and reject them, you know, like obsess about something for a while and then drop it. And he knew me well enough to know when I came up with this cargo bike idea that I should make that film. So I was in touch with people in Portland who were the first ones that sent me crowdsourced media. And there was enough there to create a trailer, which I used to present this idea to this community. And I started the Facebook group, as you see in the film, and people started sending me video. And from there on, it just felt like I was running after a moving train, you know, just trying to catch up and eventually trying to find the thread in all of these little pieces of video that transcended the bike, you know, and felt universal. And that took a very long time.
I think it's amazing that here you were in California, here I am in New Haven, and I started riding my cargo bike with my kids when they were 3 and 1, and they're 7 and 9 now. So, and I was inspired by 2 of the same people that you were, with both Sarahs here in New Haven. I actually, you know, was inspired seeing Sarah Armstrong ride her cargo bike in Rock to Rock. This is an annual Earth Day bike ride that I help organize. And somebody connected me with the other Sarah who was looking to sell her cargo bike as her kids had outgrown it. And I was looking to buy. So I borrowed Sarah's bike for a couple of weeks to try it out, and ended up buying another bike, but loving the experience and getting sold on it because of that experience. So it's amazing that that the same people could be inspiring 2 people on different sides of the planet and or the country. And
back then, the cargo bike world was still pretty small. It's blown up since then, but there weren't that many of us.
What do you think that the experience of creating the film and of both creating it and publishing it, of sharing it, has had on your town, on Fairfax, California? Could you describe that transformation at all? Is it?
You know, I don't know how much people have been affected by the fact that I made the film here, but I think just see, I was one of the first moms in town, and just I really believe in the power of, you know, the sight of a woman carrying 2 kids who are smiling, you know, riding through town like every day, and everybody smiles at you and everybody waves at you, and our town is only 7,000 people, right? So I was a fixture. And then there was another one, and then there was another one, and then there was another, and then like the bike rack at school is full of cargo bikes, you know. So I think that, as I said in the film, I was really frustrated with Fairfax being a bike loving town that was so thoroughly sport focused. So that the needle has moved there.
That's awesome. Do you feel like that's a big part of the vision that you were going for? Are you know, you talked a lot about the suffragette movement in the film and how that took 70 years to be successful. Could you talk a little bit about your vision and where you think we are in it?
Yeah. So I'm glad you told me you were going to ask me this question, because it's a big one, and I gave it some thought. And really, for me, through my life experience, my experience as a mom, my experience in making the film and meeting the people that I did, I started to think of this need that we have as human beings to be connected to our bodies and our communities and the natural world as like not just a nice thing to have, like a human right kind of thing. And American modern, especially middle class life, pushes you so in the other direction of like spending a lot of time on the screen and a lot of time in your car. And when you decompress, you're using, you know, your phone and maybe food and shopping and alcohol. And so I wanted to make a film that talked about this profound need that we have, and the way that a bicycle is just very, very good at meeting that need. So I would hope that the bike movement could move towards talking about cycling that way, and cyclists as regular people who are meeting a human need that we have to move our culture in this direction, not that direction. And so we get away from the idea we have of cyclists as kind of rabble-rousing, you know, racers and messengers and, you know, just moms and kids and dads. And so we need more critical mass. We need more safe routes to school. We need I know there was a question about teaching cycling skills to children in public schools, which seems really radical, but it makes so much sense. I mean, it boosts mental, not only mental stability, but mental acuity, to ride your bike to school. And I guess I would make a connection to the suffragettes, in that I think small actions, persistent over time, make a really big difference. And the quote that I used, the Rebecca Solnit quote that I used at the end of the film, is from an article called Protest and Persist in The Guardian. Everybody should read it. It's absolutely amazing and very relevant. And it just becomes more powerful and more relevant all the time. But here, I want to read. She wrote, "You do what you can. What you've done may do more than you can imagine for generations to come. You plant a seed and a tree grows from it. Will there be fruit, shade, habitat for birds, more seeds, a forest, wood to build a cradle or a house? You don't know. A tree can live much longer than you. So will an idea. And sometimes the changes that result from accepting that new idea about what is true, right, might just remake the world. You do what you can do. What you do does is not up to you." So like, I had no idea when I just started riding a cargo bike through town that, or even when I started making the film, that, I mean, I've heard from hundreds and hundreds of people who said, yeah, we don't have a car anymore, because we saw your film. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the things that Dave Cohen said in the film that really struck me was that that when you get in the car, it's like you're giving up. And I felt that's how I feel every time I get in my car. Like I've given up. Sometimes I'm just going too far, but sometimes, I try more and more to not use it, but it does. I like that really resonated with me. That impact, even if just that one act, not just like the choice of giving up the car or not, but those little things. Like I'm kind of embarrassed that I went to the library and I could have, and I'm parking. That's when I'm like, but I think that this film does a really great job of helping us, inspiring us all to make a better choice and to be models in our communities to help others make those choices as well. So I'm grateful for that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
There are some questions from the audience that were submitted in advance, and I wanted to share some of them. And I wanted to ask if you have a question in the audience this evening and want to raise your hand or put it in the chat. There's a crew of Yale students who are helping to manage those questions coming in and making sure that Jonathan, feel free to pipe up if you see a question that comes in that's relevant in a certain moment. I'm trying to monitor them myself. But one of the questions came in specifically about parenting for you, Liz, and about how we might, I think this is from Holly Simon. She says, how do you think we can better support new mothers through the feeling of a loss of identity that seems to be particularly plague us mothers of multiples?
So people have asked me like if I had postpartum depression in the film, and no, I had severe sleep deprivation. And also just a loss of focused time by myself, I also suffered from like guilt. Like I felt like it wasn't okay that I wanted time away from my children really badly, and I think the thing that Anne Marie Berenson says in the film, she's the woman from Holland. She talks about how American mothers hover over their children, like as if their hands need to be held at all times. Mm-hmm. So that reminds me of, it was really a breakthrough moment when I discovered my kids loved going to preschool. Like they loved going to preschool, and I loved their teachers, and I had a relationship with their teachers where suddenly I felt like this is okay. They're great. they're doing awesome. And I don't think it's a coincidence that in the Netherlands, they're much closer to gender equity. They're also far less overprotective of their children. So I think in this country, it's partly a function of sexism. We love to judge mothers. Mothers are so willing to drive everywhere, to spend their whole lives driving everywhere. But there they have, you know, paternity leave, maternity leave, public, high quality childcare. And so I think it's a matter of recognizing that mothers can't be everything. Children should be more independent, and fathers need to participate more. And we need to recognize how it takes over your whole body. You know, it's a big deal.
Yeah, those are really good suggestions. I loved watching your children grow in the film, and I'm curious about how you think that the cargo biking and your relationship with them, how that impacted your relationship, raising them in the bike. I
think that the moment when, I mean, I have 100, you can see in the film, I have 100 stairs. The moment when I had all the snacks packed and all the diapers and all the wipes and everything packed and in the cargo bike, and they're strapped in, and I put like a lollipop or something in their hands and I start rolling down the hill, it's like Emily Finch said in the film, it's me time. Like, we're all happy. This is perfect. You know, it was just like, as soon as I start rolling, that feeling starts, you know? And then I think that their relationship to the town, their sense of their place in Fairfax is different because of growing up always going everywhere where they can feel, you know, touch, hear, everything.
Yeah, I love when Emily Finch was saying that I love my life. It's raining and I love my life. It's not only when you have 6 kids and it's raining that you are in a cargo bike and you say that. Like, I remember riding down hills with my kids and they would shout, "Dangerous!" just the whole way down the hill, and just with glee and like scared, but like, this is how we're going to deal with this fear, you know? Yeah, it's a thrilling experience and makes, yeah.
Anna, did you see that Dave's here? Dave Cohen, another person from the film.
Do you mind spotlighting him, Jonathan? Can you find Dave? Thanks. Yeah, I wanted to ask Dave, welcome.
Thanks.
My kids especially love the part of the film where you closed the door on us and we couldn't hear you.
I've been waiting to do that for years.
Thank you for joining us from Brattleboro. I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about your work and a little bit about, I don't know, I'm curious about being kind of a neighbor to Vermont. I always am envious of the different policies and different culture that you have. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about your experience and what you do in Brattleboro.
Yeah, to be really brief, I was actually in Liz's neck of the woods. I was living in Berkeley for a long time, and I started a company called Pedal Express, which is a bicycle delivery service. That was back in the early 90s. It was using cargo bikes. So we were the first out there really using cargo bikes, and the front of our bikes had a big sign on it, "One less car." The back of our shirts said, "Our other car isn't one either." And just to create confusion, you know, people get confused and then they ask questions, you know. And eventually, you know, Pedal Express is still going. Originally, it was called PedX, but then Federal Express didn't like that we had a similar name, and they threatened to sue us. But eventually, I moved to Vermont. I've been living in Vermont for about 13 years. And we got I always rode cargo, you know, been riding cargo bikes for years, but I got my first electric cargo bike because my son was going to a school up on top of a hill, and we decided the only way we're going to really do that and be sustainable, be able to ride them to school every day, is getting an electric cargo bike. And we got the first electric cargo bike in Vermont. And just to make the long story short, a legislator in Vermont found out about it. I started talking to her, and then all of a sudden I found I had a position with the state, a contract to provide these consultations with Vermonters, and it's been awesome. We like to call it, I think I got this from one of the clips that Liz had from as she was making the film, but I like to call this car reduction therapy. I forgot who said that, but I let people know that as they're calling me and I'm doing these consultations for Vermonters around cargo bikes and electric assist options, that this is car reduction therapy, that the car is like encapsulated us in ways, in a way that I like to call it, it's like the corporate takeover of our corporeal experience. These corporations are selling us on a way to have extreme power in the world, but also taking away these like really tender connections that we have to the world. And as a therapist, and I am a therapist, that's my interest, is our embodied connection to the world.
One of the when somebody in the chat has posed a comment, but also before when he registered, he also asked the question, most people believe we just need to build a safe, efficient, non-motorized infrastructure, gleaming subway cars or protected bike lanes, for example, and people will get out of their cars. Do you agree, or are you suggesting that some kind of cultural shift that's necessary to change our transportation modality here in the USA? Is that necessary? So could you, this is Jay Stange, who I'm sorry if I'm butchering your name, but do either of you want to respond to that question?
I do think it's a cultural shift. And it has to do with, becoming more alive in our own bodies and more empowered to like create our own experiences and not be satisfying ourselves thoroughly through, consuming this or that or the other thing that we're supposed to buy or we're supposed to have or we're supposed to do. And I don't know, that's not the greatest answer. Dave, you're all over this one.
Well, I see it happening here in Vermont. So one of the things that I've been working on for the past few years is to get ways that we can subsidize or have rebates for people to be able to ride and use, get a cargo bike, an electric bike, or whatever, because it levels the playing field. It makes the bike less exclusive and makes it inclusive. And that's what we're looking to do. And so what's happened, like this year, the number of rebates, so we have one utility that's offering, we actually have 4 utilities that are offering rebates. So one of them processed about 600 rebates just for this year. And for Vermont, that's substantial. We're estimating that there's way over 1,000 new electric bikes and electric cargo bikes in Vermont just in 2020. And I can see the difference. It's already shaping how people think about transportation and mobility. And it's opening up a conversation that really couldn't happen here because the car is literally colonized. I think it's like it's colonized our landscape, our biosphere, our soundscapes. It has also colonized our bodies and our opinions. And so, Liz's film particularly has really helped this work that I do, because it's just opened up the kind of a worldview for people that they've never seen before. And with all the bikes on the streets, it's creating the shift.
And I think there's a connection between anything the government does, any kind of infrastructure, any kind of tax rebates or subsidies, and our cultural understanding of like where bikes fit into the world. Like I've told the story before. When I went to Portland to do the interviews, and this guy lent me a cargo bike and I put my camera equipment in it, and he gave me a map and he sent me across town on a boulevard where I had the right of way the whole way, and cars on either side had to stop and wait for me. And it was the first time in my life, that I didn't feel like a second-class citizen on a bike. And you realize how powerful that is. The government's telling you, please do this. We want you to do this. We will keep you safe.
Mm.
One of the questions that we just got from the audience was from Kathy as a party. She asked, did you finish making the film before the COVID pandemic hit? And could you, cycle use and appreciation of nature has increased since the global lockdowns. Is there anything you would do or say differently now in the film? And it was just kind of related to a question that we got from
Fred Zelt.
From Fred Zelt about the pandemic and noticing any difference. I think that Fred was might be able to answer his unmute himself and have it say a few words about his experience with that, with pandemic cycling. As an, it seems like, I don't know.
Fred?
Is that possible, Fred?
Hi. Yeah, I've gotten to know Liz through the movie and interactions online. With the pandemic, I started a Facebook group. I thought it would only be needed for a few weeks. And here we are, you know, almost a year later. There are members in 68 countries, and many people are saying that they're cycling more now because of the pandemic for physical health, mental health, and there are lots more open streets things happening all over the place. A lot of us are hoping that some of these things will stick after the pandemic. And I know, Liz, you've been thinking deeply about this. So I'm curious kind of where you think we are in all that process, and what your aspirations or hopes for us all are for the future too.
Well, I mean, what I said when I launched the Bike to Pandemic project, which is still not finished, was that I hoped I could, or that I could give bike advocates a tool that they could use to galvanize energy around maintaining all this temporary, you know, pop-up infrastructure and slow streets everywhere. Because I think when people start to use something like that every day, at a certain point, they feel like, I really don't want to lose this. This is my mental health right here. So I was hoping that I could provide a tool that people could use to, you know, get their town, the people in their town that are really invested in those slow streets, to stand up, you know, to the town council and make sure that it remains. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it's good.
Well,
Maybe other people who are listening have observations from their own communities as well.
I'd like to bring some of the local people into the conversation. Sarah, it looks like Sarah Armstrong is here. I'm not sure if the other Sarah Bullitzer is, but Sarah, would you tell us a little bit about your experience cargo biking in New Haven, and what you have, you know, the changes that you've seen over the years and its friendliness, the city's friendliness of biking.
So I'm Sarah. I moved to New Haven 14 years ago. We were a one-car family. We moved here with 2 5-year-olds and a 2-year-old. And for a year, I was really lonely. I thought we were going to have instant community. My husband was in graduate school. I thought, oh, of course, these folks. And in our second year, I got a job. I'm an educator. I got a job at a school that our twins were going to attend. And the school was just over 2 miles away. And I thought, that's ridiculous to take the one car. But I didn't think their 5-year-old legs would want to walk both ways. And I started Googling things like pedicabs. And I actually met up with another friend from Maine who had twins, who has no dryer. So she was hand washing and hanging her diapers. And she said to me, well, just get a Bach feet. And I was like, oh, what? And I literally like had her write it down. And I ripped the piece of paper, I stuck it in my pocket. And when I got home from that trip, I became a woman possessed. And at that time, there really wasn't a lot of cargo bikes that I could find on the East Coast, and there were no dealers and such. And I was just like Googling, I was emailing randomly anyone that I could find on the internet. And I learned about, of course, Portland, Oregon, and Clever Cycles that was importing bikes. And I did realize the great irony of like these bikes coming over on a huge piece of cargo from the Netherlands to Portland. And then here I'm in New Haven saying like, oh, I want one of those bikes. But I took it as a sign that holiday season, my boys and I were downtown at a coffee shop, and a woman walked in, and she had a foldable bike. And my sons, who are curious and not shy, which is good when you're on a cargo bike because you talk to a lot of people, but they like became obsessed with her bike and asked her to unfold it and fold it up. And it turned out there was a sticker and it said Clever Cycles. And it was Ellie Blue, who is from Hamden, Connecticut, and is now, of course, a huge voice, especially about women, feminism, bikes, and economics. And she publishes and such out in Portland. But once I saw that Clever Cycle sticker, I was like, oh yeah, we're gonna have to make that happen. And so we got a cargo bike, and then it just changed our lives completely. It connected us so much to the community. You just stop, you talk to people. One person said before we bought it, like, don't get it if you don't want to talk to strangers, because you're gonna end up talking to everyone. And what was so exciting was that I do think the visibility is like, if you see someone doing that, suddenly the possibility is like, oh, wait, maybe I could do that too. And so that was 13 years ago. At that time, and like over the 5 years, 6, 7 years that we were exclusively, we rode cargo bikes for a long time. And we were well supported by kind of the guys at the Devil Gear were really like amused by us and really helped us out. And a bike shop is one of the places you can take 3 little curious people into, and they don't give you a hard time. And so we got different bikes depending, but as we rode, we talked to other people, and then other bikes would show up. But at that time, you know, everyone told me where I was all the time because they would recognize us by the bike. They were like, oh, we know you were down at the green, or you must have been here. And then we definitely saw a shift, because at some point I realized like, oh, I don't know who owns that cargo bike. Like that for me, it was like the biggest thing in New Haven was like, oh, I don't know who owns that cargo bike. But we did create a great community for a period of time. We had a critical mass that was running very regularly, and a lot of people were talking to each other, and we were doing kind of bike petting zoos where people could try it out. And we definitely in that time not just saw like kind of an explosion in cargo bikes, but we just saw way more people riding. And so that was really exciting. And what has been interesting though is once our boys grew out of the cargo bikes, they are really quite good cyclists. But the truth was it became harder once they were out of the cargo bike with 5 of us in different places, and then the U-locks and the what, and we'd still go by bike. But the question about parenting and how it changes things, I was thinking about the fact that I wish I could say that my now 2 18-year-olds and a 15-year-old were riding their bikes everywhere. My 15-year-old bike commuted by himself in middle school for 7th, 8th grade. But my 18-year-olds, while they don't cycle, and I think some of that is because of infrastructure, to be very blunt, they can cycle and will cycle with us, but they're not taking their bikes by themselves and going downtown. But neither of them have a driver's license. And they use, pre-COVID, they were big Connecticut transit bus folks. And I don't think that's an accident that they use public transportation. And I also think they know very well that bikes are a really completely legitimate form of transportation.
I'm glad that you checked on infrastructure, because one of the questions in the chat is interesting. They ask, the automobile and highway infrastructure has been used as a way to segregate communities. Is there a reason why that component was not touched upon in the film?
I only really learned about those studies after the film, but also I had to make a decision. I mean, the questions of like urban planning and infrastructure are so huge. And early on, I decided, and it was partly because Ross Evans said to me, people make decisions for emotional reasons, and then they rationalize them for intellectual reasons. So my film was going to be sort of an invitation into this world that is full of joy and full of beautiful sights and endorphins. And so that's what I wanted to make, just like a film that really expressed the joy. Couldn't cover everything.
I wonder if we might actually bring in Doug Houseiden from the city's Department of Transportation and Parking to talk a little bit about infrastructure in New Haven. Talk a little bit about what he's doing. We also, we have only a few more minutes left, and I want to also bring in the people from the New Haven Coalition for Active Transportation and the Elm City Cycling, and maybe all of that's Paul Pruhl and David Berkowitz and maybe Karen Jenkins if they're on the call. Doug Houseiden.
Hi, can you see me okay?
I can hear you, Doug.
Oh,
Great.
good, there I am.
Would you like to say a few words about what you're working on? And
Sure, thank you. It's so great to see so many friends, and thank you, Liz, for your contributions for the documentary. It was amazing. The city director of transportation for the city of New Haven, we are in the middle of a citywide active transportation master plan process that is trying to have an active transportation plan being a pedestrian plan, a bike plan, and a transit plan, all three at the moment. So it's very exciting, and we're working with allies around the room to get the word out over 2021. Thanks so much.
thanks, Doug. One of your allies, I know you're on the board also of the New Haven Coalition for Active Transportation. Dave Berkowitz, would you be willing to talk a little bit about what your organization is working on?
Yeah, well, one of the things that we've identified for getting more cyclists out there is lack of education. So training on people how to be safe in the streets and how to ride. So we'll be offering classes in the spring and summer, and you can find out more at our website, which I'll put in the chat, but it's www.nhcat.org. And I think that that'll really help and get people to feel safe. We're also thinking about, as was featured in the movie, of doing a ciclovia like they had in Los Angeles, and having that kind of event where people can get out of their cars and get on bikes or walk and explore our city. And I really enjoyed the movie, and I'm a cargo biker. I ride a Setma. My kids are a little too big for it now, but I really appreciated the idea of that Liz showed in the movie of Googling how to move your kids around on bike, because in 2008 I was going through the same thing. So it's funny to know that other people are out there doing the same thing.
David, did you see the guy who was pedaling me around the ciclovia? That's Lane, who built your bike.
I thought that was him. Yeah. That's crazy to me that bike had to come all the way from the West Coast to here, but it did.
There have been a lot of questions about cargo bikes and how access and the expense. I know I was choosing between a minivan and a cargo bike, so it looked really affordable to me. But when you're looking at bikes, it's not as affordable of an option. And I don't know if anybody's really familiar with any library services or anything like that. Does anybody have an experience with? Somebody also asked, like, how extensive are the opportunities to do the financing for cargo bikes? Does anybody know how to answer that question?
Well, yeah. as far as financing, there are some banks and credit unions that will have financing. We have that through the Vermont State Employees Credit Union. It's one of the first things that VBike did in Vermont was get that. There are some states, there are some areas where there are subsidies that are happening, or mainly rebates. In Austin, there's one town in California that's experimenting with that with electric bikes. That needs to be way wider. We need to be subsidizing. There need to be rebates. In Burlington, there's a bike shop, Old Spokes Home, and they've got a program to provide low-income residents access to electric bikes at incredibly low prices. So, and we're looking to more programs like that in Vermont. I think that that's absolutely essential to really break down the barriers, the financial barriers, particularly for folks that can't afford these bikes, which definitely are more expensive than a conventional bike.
I've been waiting for some major bike share company to do electric cargo bike share. I just don't understand it. I think there are a lot of people that would use bike share if there were bikes that could carry like people and things,
There in Europe, there's Cycle Logistics. If you look at their website, you'll find cities where there are bike share programs, or some of them are just community run, where there are cargo bikes. Yeah, I think that's absolutely. I'd love to see that myself.
I know also Cycle Logistics is a great resource. They're the project of the European Cycling Federation, and they did a webinar in 2020 about what was called the Commons cargo bike movement, which is basically teaching people how to set up a cargo bike share in your town. So yeah.
I'm curious if any of us have hope for our communities for becoming more like Portland or Amsterdam and being in their level of bike friendliness. I don't know, Karen, you've got a lot of experience work as a cycling advocate. Do you have an opinion on what's your temperature on where we're at?
I think, good evening, everyone, and thank you, Liz, for the very good film. I'm delighted to be here with David Berkowitz and Doug and his other guys represent the New Haven Coalition for Active Transportation. I think one of the points you made in your film, Liz, was that Portland and parts of Europe started 30, 40 years ago. This did not happen overnight. We're very fortunate in New Haven that Mayor Tony Harp was an urban planner and very supportive of biking, walking activities, infrastructure, and now with Mayor Justin Elicker. We held a Bike to Work Day event and the mayor pulled up on his bike. So the issue of having scrappy advocates is no longer the issue. In other words, it's not about the advocacy effort of 20 or 30 years ago. It's really taking us to another level. So getting more bicycle-friendly businesses certified through the League of American Bicyclists. I should also say that we believe strongly at the New Haven Coalition for Active Transportation that bike education in schools is very important. Every child should have bike education as part of their curriculum. So our goal is to penetrate the schools. We know it's work, but long-term, that's the real goal, is that all children should have bike education as part of K through 12. And if I didn't say it before, our classes are free. We don't charge for our classes. We want everyone to take a ride, to learn how to ride safely. All of our instructors are league cycling instructors certified by the League of American Bicyclists. And I see several people on the line, from Doug to Paul Prule. I saw Joel LaChance's name, so I apologize if I left anyone out. I also want to say, because I don't want to take up too much time, that we really do need to be very mindful about equity in biking. And so one of the things we know for sure is that people who ride bikes who are low income, who are immigrants, they're riding bikes. And frankly, they take the brunt of the crashes that happen. They're riding at night, they don't have helmets, they don't have good training. So we have a program that we're going to be starting this spring with bike education classes for people that are served by community organizations that serve immigrants, formerly incarcerated people. We want all of our classes to be integrated with all kinds of people. We know that if you're on a bike, no matter how rich you are as vulnerable as the poorest person sitting next to you on the road. So that equal vulnerability means that we really need to plan to get more people into bike education classes so they learn how to ride whatever the bike, cargo bike, tandem bike, which I used to ride with a sight impaired woman. We want everyone to learn to ride confidently and also with joy. So that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing that, Karen. I know that there were, I'm glad that you brought up equity. There were a couple of questions about the unequal distribution of cargo biking, and that somebody made a comment about how athletic cyclists that put their bikes on their truck and go ride around in a circle and then come back to it. And cargo bikers are predominantly white, and how there's a disparity, and that the majority of cyclists are Black and Indigenous and people of color. And that those numbers are growing. I don't have the question exactly
Anna, may I?
in front of me, but yeah, would you?
May I add, with respect to the how do we get to Amsterdam kind of question,
Yeah.
besides building a bridge or taking a long ship ride, but the like Portland that started on the lawsuit, Amsterdam started because of a mother sitting down and taking over the public space and demanding it. But that was 40 years ago. What we've seen during the COVID crisis, of course, has been a highlighting of the inequities in our society, but we've also seen a lot of cities take risks and take jumps. And some of those cities, like Jersey City, other cities that launched aggressively, Boston, for instance, Boston Transportation Department, not nearly good enough infrastructure when you're just launching on the fly during a pandemic, but they all started with planning, right? They all took advantage. That's the wrong terminology, I would say, but they all implemented quickly and rapid implementation plans. And those plans were years in the making to make the culture ready for the infrastructure, if you will. And those two together, I think, really make a bike city. And as Karen mentioned, with the education and other critical mass, as mentioned by our friend, those bring up the culture, but two together make a bike city. And so we got to start day one, have a plan, start implementing. And when there are opportunities, just like any organizing event, you have a long grinding organizing, and then eventually you can take big jumps and leaps. And that's, how many years for Rock to Rock, for instance, that's part of that bike culture aspect. That's giving the political will to start laying the groundwork for these planning efforts to then hopefully leaps and bounds. It's just bike infrastructure. It's not that costly. We should, once we have the political will and organization to do it, we should be able to exercise it.
I have a question about biking infrastructure for you, Doug, and maybe Paul too. Paul Kakolis says that he wanted to know our thoughts on city planning optimizing for mobility, utilizing rail, canal trails with spurs to neighborhoods versus utilizing on-road strategies with wider shoulders or sharrows. Does the rail trail lead track users into something equal but separate, or does it encourage more to get out with less concern about conflict with motor vehicles?
That's a really good question. And I have a very good friend in Guilford who rides, and he is against rail trails. He thinks bikes belong on the road and following the rules of the road, and that there shouldn't be any conflict. But unfortunately there is. And in the movie, I was going to ask Liz, and the movie was great, by the way, the guy in the red car yelling at the woman, saying she's a terrible mother and all that. Have you seen that kind of behavior growing, declining, or remaining the same?
Since I stopped making the film, I haven't really been monitoring it. I am constantly shocked at how many, particularly mothers, tell me they've had some kind of, you were just telling me the other day, Anna, about your experiences like that. I do think, like with a lot of social movements, the more progress we make, as you know, the more bikes are on the road, the more women are carrying children on bikes, the more, you know, you're going to get resistance. You're going to get people who are freaked out by it, and then there'll be a tipping point, right? And it will be normalized. So maybe it's not a bad thing if there's more people yelling at mom, you know?
So the East Coast Greenway, you know, is connecting Maine to Florida with a bike lane, which covers our whole Northeast corridor. And their goal is to get it all off the road. So but I still think, you know, we need on the road infrastructure, because we're not going to have rail trails that go everywhere. And, you know, and hopefully we have the Edgewood Avenue cycle track coming in soon. And, you know, we're piecing together a network in New Haven that will allow people to get around the city, you know, on protected bike lanes, or at least bike lanes, you know, without the luxury of having a rail trail. The only rail trail we're going to have is the Farmington Canal Trail, because there's no more rails unless we do away with Amtrak.
Well, we only have about 3 minutes left remaining. If anybody has any pressing questions that they want to unmute themselves, now would be the time. But I wonder if, Liz, if you could speak a little bit to the logistics of doing a film that is through Kickstarter and crowdsourced, and talk a little bit about that, because there were a couple of questions about that, and I'm sorry I didn't get to them earlier. Could you say a little bit about a little advice that you might have for budding entrepreneurs?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's important. I think the key with my project was that I chose something that people take a lot of pride in, right? They're so excited about having made this decision, and they really want to share it with the world, right? That's key, because then you just have people shooting video and they want the world to see it and they send it to you. And having it be crowdsourced and then crowdfunded, like my network just grew, right? Every time I did something like that, there was more excitement, there was more. And with the Kickstarter, what was key was that I think most of the big cargo bike companies thought, there's a woman who's crazy enough to make a film about this, you know, we need to help her. So they donated product that became a reward in my Kickstarter campaign, and it allowed me to raise like over $63,000. And then when it came time to distribute, you know, and I started going to film festivals, I remember there was a moment when I was watching a panel of very established directors. They've all made, you know, $1 million plus really beautiful documentaries. And there was a question about impact, and they were all expressing frustration that, you know, their films have been on Netflix, people have seen them, and then 2 weeks later, nothing has changed. So I was shocked to think that this film that was big parts of it were shot like by parents holding a phone while pedaling their child. You know, there was some immediacy there. There was some investment, because they were part of the process of making it. They were part of the process of funding it, and then ultimately part of the process of distributing it. And I think that has really increased the impact of the project.
Well, I'm grateful that you made this project, and I'm really looking forward to future projects of yours. Thank you so much for sharing your story and this film with us and the world. And thank you again to the Yale School of the Environment's Urban Learning Community and the Hickson Center for Urban Ecology for co-sponsoring this event, and to all of you who've submitted some fabulous questions. I'm sorry we haven't gotten through all of them, but we will save the chat and see if we can respond to some of them that we weren't able to in the call later. Thank you, everyone. It's been a really a pleasure to spend the evening with you.
Thank you for having me. Thanks, Anna.
Bye, Anna. Bye, Liz.
Thank you.
Sarah,
Bye,
thank
Liz.
you, Dave.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Asha and Jonathan. Thank you to Dave Cohen. It's been a pleasure to talk with you all.
There's my mom who just bought a tricycle.
Chaos.